Do you think that maybe because they feared a backlash, that if they banned only the EDL, that there'd be this precedent for banning freedom of speech, which could actually affect everybody, because there's also that counter-argument?
Well, the problem is, it's not everyone agrees with freedom of speech, but people also believe that, you know, that comes with responsibility as well. And there is no law in this land which gives people like the EDL to be violent and to spread hatred. I mean, that's against the law. That's not freedom of speech. That is actually, you know, that's just grotesque exploitation, to use a demonstration to then try and violently attack communities and literally run riot and attack places of worship, not just mosques, also Hindu temples, Sikh temples were attacked in Dudley, and to attack innocent Asian, Black and Muslim communities. That's what happens as a result of their demonstrations. That's not freedom of speech, that's against the law.
And do you think, Bob, that with the visible strength of numbers and support, some of this very damaging rhetoric against, for example, the East London Mosque is being now countered? Do you feel that the portrayal of that in the media, what actually happened on Saturday, has shifted, or is there still a long way to go?
I think there is still a long way to go, but I think there was encouragement there on Saturday, and I think there's perhaps, you know, there's now perhaps the beginning of, one would like to think, an appreciation of the kind of, you know, the real genuine strength that exists in Tower Hamlets. I think it's an important model because elsewhere in the country, Muslim communities, less well organised, less numerous, I think, do face a much greater threat, a threat of ongoing intimidation from the EDL and indeed from, you know, a range of violent Islamophobic attacks.
And if I could just come back to you, Moazzam, as somebody who lives in Birmingham but works in the East End, on a personal level, do you feel hope from what's happened on Saturday?
Well, one thing is that I think it was incredibly stupid for the EDL to try to push forward a march so soon after the riots in the UK. It seemed ridiculous. So in a sense, it seems that the police took the right measures in this regard. But again, to the community, I know that community in Whitechapel very well. They're great supporters of our work, and we're great supporters of what they do. And clearly they have managed to maintain a status quo there, the likes of which I think that region hasn't really seen at all. The fact that you've got a mosque right next to one of the oldest synagogues in the East End is a testimony to the types of people that you have over there. You're not getting people espousing extremism, you're getting people who are espousing an idea of diversity and living together, and constantly you'll see at the East London Mosque people...
The message seems to be blocked by people who have their own agenda of trying to portray areas like Tower Hamlets as somehow polarised.
I think so.
Which may not be the lived reality of the people.
I think so. But I think also you'll find people like myself and you and many others you'll find on the EDL blogs spoken of, that these people are a threat to the security and to the diversity of this country and so forth. But these people, I think, one of the things that I often do when I talk about terrorism and extremism is that there needs to be an engagement. And I think even with the EDL, there needs to be a certain type of engagement with people who, as Bob said, that had they seen those people that day, they would probably have given up. And I think to break down their arguments would be something that I would love to do.
And in what kind of forum would you imagine that? So we've had on the streets, and so that message is going out.
In a very personal, very sort of private settings where people can sit down and talk about issues. And if they can't be spoken of, if you can't reach an agreement with the police, then what there is a process in which you've begun a dialogue. And normally when that happens, it's harder to hate from when you're very close by. It's much more easier to hate from a distance, and that's been my experience.
Well, on that conciliatory note, we'll take a break, but please do join us for the second half. Assalamu alaikum and welcome back. In the second half of today's show, we'll be discussing a very important anniversary for Muslims and indeed the world over. It's now 10 years since the 9/11 attacks. What was and is the impact on Muslims in the UK of those terrible attacks? In that time, there have been 2 invasions and occupations of Muslim countries, the introduction of tough anti-terrorism legislation, the creation of the widely condemned Guantanamo Bay prison, and a steady rise in Islamophobia. Well, with me to discuss this is Dr. Peter Morey, who's the co-author of Framing Muslim Stereotypes After 9/11. Thank you for coming to the programme today, Peter. We also have with us from the first half Dr. Robert Lambert, who is now the author of Countering Al-Qaeda in London, Police and Muslims in Partnership. Thank you for staying with us. And of course we have Moazzam Begg. Thank you for staying on. Before we discuss the issues of 9/11, 10 years on, let's have a quick look at what's been happening.
When two passenger planes hit the World Trade Center buildings in New York on the 11th of September 2001, the world recoiled in horror as almost 3,000 people lost their lives. Muslims were among the dead, and Muslims were also among those most critical of the attacks. The atrocities were widely blamed on Al-Qaeda, although this was never confirmed by the group until years later. However, the life of Muslims around the world was set to change significantly. The impact of 9/11 has been keenly felt by the UK's 2 million Muslims. Anti-terrorism legislation was introduced with far-reaching implications. Muslims and civil liberty groups have complained loudly about what they have seen as the discrimination and unfair treatment of Muslims. Thousands of Muslims have been detained under anti-terror laws, while many have also been detained without charge or trial at the notorious US-run Guantanamo Bay Detention Center. Guantanamo was created in the aftermath of 9/11 and has had nearly 1,000 Muslim inmates, including a number of British citizens and residents. But it remains open. This is despite a promise from US President Barack Obama to close it down when he came to office in 2009.
Since 9/11, of course, we've seen a whole series of anti-terror measures in the United Kingdom, the United States of America and elsewhere. We've seen wars being continued. We've seen an increase of hostility in Afghanistan and elsewhere, and now in Somalia. The change that was promised to us by Obama, the one that everybody thought would bring a real change to US foreign policy, simply didn't come about, other than the fact that everything that we saw and believed was wrong has simply been cemented by Obama's policies, for example, of saying that those who were involved in carrying out torture will be immune from prosecution, the increase of drone attacks used in the northwest regions of Pakistan, the fact that the military commissions process that had been regarded by the rest of the world as something inadequate has been reinstated, and the fact also now that there are existences of secret CIA detention sites operating in Somalia, where we have eyewitness testimony from people who have been abused by American interrogators this year.
Western powers also embarked on the invasion of two Muslim countries, Afghanistan in 2001, in a stated effort to destroy Al-Qaeda, and in Iraq in 2003. Both wars, especially Iraq, have been hugely controversial and regarded as illegal by many Muslims. They've prompted major protests, especially in Britain. The conflicts and anti-terror laws, as well as a steady rise in Islamophobia, has given many British Muslims an enormous sense of alienation. As a result, organisations like Cageprisoners, which campaigns for Muslim prisoners around the world, have been created.
We are attempting to help to redress the balance. The most important thing for us is to empower the Muslim community, is to tell them that they may be watching us, but our job is to watch them right back. So every abuse that's carried out by the police and the British intelligence services in particular, us as former detainees and as cage prisoners, we have been part of the process of throwing the ball right back in their court and saying that we're not the criminals, you are. You're the ones involved in complicity and torture. You're the ones involved in false imprisonment. You're the ones involved either physically or by complicity in collusion in the abuse of British citizens. And we will not let you forget that. And that's why the government has ordered an inquiry into torture. That's why there is a criminal investigation taking place for the first time in the history of the United Kingdom of the intelligence services. And that's why we won a big settlement from the government in the civil case.
Muslims now face an array of challenges, like Islamophobia. Perceptions of the community are often negative. Crude stereotypes of Muslims as shadowy terrorists or oppressed women pervade society, especially in the media. And despite the efforts of many Muslims to change perceptions, there have been major setbacks. The London bombings in 2005 were carried out by 4 British Muslims. The attacks not only left 52 people dead, but did massive damage to the reputation of Muslims.
Elected governments